up, yo? It's Marc with the Fantasy Knockout Fantasy Football Show. Today is Friday, September 30th. You can follow the show on any social media platform at Fantasy Knockout. Make sure to subscribe whatever platform you're watching or listening on. And let's hit that goal of 100 subscribers on YouTube. I'm excited for today's show. It's the Week 4 must-start players, the guys that we got to get in our lineups. Who are we feeling confident about this week? Who are we worried about? Quick reminder, let's check those waivers. Make sure some of these players that get dropped are better than what was out there in the first place. So just double check those waivers. Coming home from a nice little 2-day vacation in Vegas, celebrating the wife's birthday and all. Still a little puffy and hungover. So we'll get through today's show. Let's talk some news.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Here is the news.
News with views. So quarterback Tua Tagovailoa out of Miami, he was sacked and his head slammed on the ground. He was forced from the game with a head injury, obviously. He was discharged from the hospital Thursday evening and traveled back home with the Dolphins to Miami. We're not sure how long he's going to be out. They're saying concussion right now. We'll see. We got to monitor it. We'll know more next week. Running back Alvin Kamara out of New Orleans. His court hearing for his felony battery has been delayed until November 9th. It was delayed, or it last was delayed August 1st. There was also reports saying that the lawyers are coordinating a meeting for negotiations, and they'll continue to dodge a suspension this season. So the court stuff with Kamara, it's going to be next year, so we don't have to worry about it this year. And then wide receiver Sterling Shepard out of the New York Giants. He tore his ACL in Week 3 against the Cowboys. He's out for the rest of the season. Main event, the must-start players for Week 4. And if I didn't talk about a specific player you're looking for, please check out the rankings at fantasyknockout.com. Speaking of rankings, I'm currently 8th in overall accuracy for season to date. So that is up to weeks 1, 2, and 3. Nailing it right now. We're top 10. Whoop, whoop.
Quarterbacks.
All right, so my quarterbacks, we're going to start Russell Wilson of the Denver Broncos. That's right. Yes, I said Russell Wilson, who has been struggling. This game is going to be very telling for the Denver Broncos, for the offense, in what could be the last time anyone addresses to start or play Russ. The Raiders have given up a top 8 or higher fantasy quarterback in each week this season. Wilson hasn't thrown a red zone touchdown yet, which should turn around at some point, and I'm expecting it to be this week. The Denver team has struggled inside the 20-yard line, and this matchup against the Raiders could be the turning point. We're going to stream Jared Goff of the Detroit Lions. So Goff has 7 touchdown passes through 3 games. Even more impressive is that 5 of those are in the red zone. He has been throwing more when the team gets inside the 20-yard line, which should continue to produce touchdown opportunities for Goff. Best argument for Goff is Amon-Ra St. Brown. Right now, Seattle is allowing the NFL's 5th highest expected points per pass attempt and the highest yards per attempt.
Running backs.
All right, my running backs. We're going to start Breece Hall out of the New York Jets. He played 51% of the snaps in Week 3, carrying the ball 8 times while seeing a team-high 11 targets. It was the first time all season we've seen him play more snaps than Michael Carter. While Carter still saw more carries with 11, the passing game usage went Hall's way. The Steelers have allowed 25.8 fantasy points per game to running backs so far this season, the 9th most in the NFL, so start Hall. My other co-start running back is going to be Jamal Williams out of Detroit. So DeAndre Swift is out. He's going to miss some time. Williams already leads the league in carries inside the 10-yard line and already carved out a role in this offense. That will surely evolve with no Swift, making Williams a weekly running back 2 with more upside until Swift returns. He gets to go in a favorable spot against the Seahawks this week. And then my fade of the week is J.K. Dobbins out of Baltimore. It was great seeing him return in Week 3. He ended up playing 44% of the snaps, carried the ball 7 times for 23 yards, and caught both his targets for 17 yards. He finished with 6 fantasy points, so a solid start for Dobbins. We're liking it. He gets a pass rush for it being his first time back, but until he shows his usual workload and burst, it's tough to trust him right now. It's especially tough considering he faces the Bills, who have allowed the 4th fewest fantasy points to running backs this week. Leave Dobbins on the bench this week.
Wide receivers.
All right, my wide receivers, we're going to kick it off with Chris Olave, the rookie out of New Orleans. So he nearly broke fantasy Twitter when he had 307 air yards on targets in week 2. He followed that up with 182 in week 3 and has by far the most in the NFL. But what you have to love is that he turned it into actual production. This past week, finishing with 9 catches for 147 yards on a team high 13 targets. It is the second week in a row he has led the Saints in targets and in air yards. He might not be the wide receiver 1 in title, but he certainly has been in production. Olave is a strong wide receiver 2 start with more upside in London this week, and Michael Thomas is out. My stream of the week is going to be DK Metcalf out of Seattle. He got back on track last week with 5 catches for 64 yards and a touchdown with 12 targets. Pete Carroll said they needed to funnel the ball to Metcalf, and they did. This week they face the Lions, who are allowing the 6th most expected points per pass attempt and the 8th most fantasy points to opposing wide receivers. So feel free to turn his way and chase that volume. And my wide receiver fade of the week is going to be Russell Gage out of Tampa Bay. So he's coming off a huge game in which he scored 24.7 fantasy points, going for 12 catches, 87 yards, and a touchdown on a team high 13 targets. That is what we like to see. We call the Julian Edelman special. This issue with that style of performance is it relies heavily on volume. It was tough for Gage to get going early, but with the Bucs playing catch up down the stretch, he was able to quickly rack up those targets. The Bucs could be playing catch up again this week in the Super Bowl rematch from 2 years ago, but Mike Evans is going to be back. Julio Jones and Chris Godwin could also be potentially back. If either of those two return, it makes it unlikely for Gage to build off of his big week 3. So let's sit Gage. Let's fade him. No, we're not starting. He's not a must start this week.
Tight ends.
All right, my tight end start of the week is going to be TJ Hawkinson out of Detroit. Hawkinson is coming off his best game of the season, in which he caught 3 passes for 18 yards and a touchdown. In total, he finished with 10.5 fantasy points, but he sees pretty safe volume each week, which keeps him in play as a low-end tight end 1. He has a favorable matchup this week against the Seahawks, who have allowed 14.5 fantasy points per game to tight ends, the 9th most in the NFL. That is after struggling against the position last year. And then my fade for this week, I know we've been telling you guys to pick him up, is Logan Thomas of Washington. There was some hope for Thomas after he scored a touchdown in week 2, but he posted a season low across the board in week 3, catching 2 passes for 5 yards on 3 targets. His targets and yards have now dwindled every game this season. He is firmly behind Curtis Samuel and Terry McLaurin in the target pecking order. And then there's just Jahan Dotson and the running backs who compete for more targets. The lackluster of guaranteed volume paired with the matchup against the Cowboys, who have been great against tight ends this season. And this week, it's just a time to get away from Thomas. All right, before we wrap it up, I got a couple guys some players I want to sell high on. If they're on your team, look to trade them and get some value. First one's going to be Cordell Patterson out of Atlanta. He is still not seeing a worthwhile role as a receiver. 1 target in for his 2nd straight week, but getting it done as a rusher with 17 carries for 141 yards and a score. But because Atlanta doesn't project to be projecting many leads for the remainder of the season, Patterson's week 3 performance is the perfect time to sell high on him. My other guy is Damian Harris out of New England. In back-to-back weeks, Ramondre Stevenson has outsnapped Damian Harris by a vast margin of 62 versus 38%. The second-year back is taking over this backfield as the preferred pass catcher and more explosive playmaker on offense. While Harris is getting just by on touchdown scores, sell high on him before this offense craters without Mac Jones. And then my other guy to sell high on is going to be Allen Lazard out of Green Bay. He's played 90% of the snaps in week 3, but still only commanded 6 targets. It's been back-to-back weeks with a meh target share for Lazard with 23% and 12%. Despite full-time usage, although his fantasy production has remained steady due to his 2 touchdown scores, it's perfect time to sell high on a player that's not being targeted versus his other teammates. All right, some guys to target possibly. I got 2 of them right now. Go get Javonte Williams out of Denver. The Denver running backs were heavily involved as receivers Sunday night with Javonte and Melvin, both seizing 5+ targets. Williams led the team with 15 carries, followed by Gordon with 12. but the usage was more split than in week 2. Williams playing just 45 snaps, 45% snap share to Melvin Gordon's 38. With the number 3 running back Mike Boone seeing just playing time of 19%. His snap rate was only 65 in week 2. Gordon also scored the lone rushing touchdown last week. So I'd be looking to buy Williams before they play the Raiders, the 0-3 Raiders, yes. And he has a monster game. The other guy I'm looking to target right now is Breece Hall, the New York Jets running back. Seeing the massive target volume over Michael Carter in week 3 is eye-opening. 11 to 12, the carries were more split, 8 to 11 in favor of Carter, although they both rushed for 39 yards and Hall outsnapped Carter 51 to 49 for the first time all season. Buy Hall now before a massive breakout game is coming, and it's coming in, 2 of these next 3 games. Well, that's going to wrap it up for today. The next show is Week 3 Injury Report. I want to say thank you for listening to the show. Make sure to subscribe on whatever platform you are watching or listening on. Please leave that rating and review. Really helps me out. All right, till next time. See ya.